Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, and today I will be carrying on with the Casey Anthony trial, and the next witness is Amy Huizenga. Amy met Casey properly on New Year's Eve at the party that they went to in 2008. Around February of 2008 they became close friends, and Amy considered her to be a best friend. She's asked about Ricardo Morales and how she knows him, and she says he is her best friend. Casey told her that she worked as an events coordinator at Universal, but Amy doesn't believe she saw any work ID. Amy and Casey would text message, they would talk on MySpace, and they would instant message each other during the time period they were friends. In fact, this was a daily occurrence, and they would be doing this more than they would be interacting face to face. They would also hang out after work. Amy did see Kaylee during this time period. There were times when they would make plans and Casey would be unable to do it due to not having anyone to look after Kaylee. Amy was aware of when Casey and Ricardo Morales broke up, but only from what Casey told her. Ricardo never really told her much. Amy had planned to live with Casey. She says this was talked about in May. They did talk about it a lot. There was an appointment made to see an apartment, but they didn't go because Casey told her it wouldn't work out. I don't think she gave any other reason apart from that. Amy said this happened a few times when they were looking for somewhere to live. Casey then told Amy that she was going to be taking over the mortgage payments to her parents' house, so they were just going to live there. And Amy believed this was going to happen in June. Amy did really want to meet Casey's mum Cindy, seeing as she was going to be living with her and living with her granddaughter, but no specific plans were made. And Amy says the only problem she saw between Casey and Cindy were when Cindy wasn't available to babysit Kaylee. Amy says that during May it was happening more than it did previously, and she noticed that Casey was getting more and more frustrated. On the 3rd of May, Amy received a text message from Casey. Amy received the message at 11:10 p.m. It says, "Downtown tomorrow, my mum owes me." Then she texted again at 11:12 p.m. and said, "This week I'm there, no way I'm staying home." Amy never really knew what Casey meant by "my mum owes me." These are messages are an occurring theme throughout May of 2008. Amy is asked about Casey and Cindy's relationship, and from what she knew, or from what she saw and what she was told, it was strained, it was hard. Cindy was continually agitated with Casey. Casey had told Amy that Cindy had said to her that she was an unfit mother, and Casey was extremely upset about that and didn't know why Cindy would say that. Not a nice thing to say, really. Amy heard a lot of arguments between Casey and Cindy, but she never heard the full conversation. She only heard the beginning and the ending of the arguments. Casey would say that her mum was crazy, and Casey was frustrated because all she wanted was some space, and she couldn't understand why her mum wouldn't or couldn't understand that. So we moved to June of 2008. Amy moved in with Ricardo on the 5th or 6th of June because she had wrecked her car, and we find out this was because she had fallen asleep at the wheel. So she moved in with Ricardo because it was closer to work. and she was only planning on staying there until she got a new car. On the 13th of June, Casey was supposed to pick up Amy early. Amy texted her to make sure she was up. Then Casey told her that she couldn't come because there had been some family issues and she had to go to the hospital with her dad. Amy heard from Casey a couple of times that day, once with regards to her dad and another to ask if Amy was going to Fusion that night. Amy says she didn't go to Fusion that night. While the state are asking Amy about the excuse of Casey's dad being in hospital, she's not allowed to say what Casey told her about what was wrong with George. Amy emailed Casey her resumes because she really wanted to work at Universal. There was a period of 3 weeks that Amy didn't see Casey, but they were obviously still in contact through messaging and stuff. Through this contact, Amy became aware of the car trouble Casey had been having. Amy knew about flat tyres and her running out of gas, and she also knew about the bad smell that was coming from the car. So Amy is shown another block of text messages from Casey. The first one says, "There was definitely part of a dead animal plastered to the frame of my car." Now, Casey had previously mentioned the smell to Amy, saying there was a bad smell coming from the car and she didn't know what it was, and she thought something might have got run over. The second message says, "My car ran out of gas again." The first time Amy remembers Casey's car running out of gas was about a week before this text. The third text message says, 2 weeks in a row on a Friday, my stupid car runs out of gas. Wow. This is the time when Casey's car ran out of gas and it was left at the Amscot, and she told Amy that she hoped it wouldn't get towed. Casey started to stay with Amy on the 30th of June. Amy is asked how this came about, and she says, well, she just turned up and never left. Amy knew Casey was dating at the time and knew that her boyfriend Tony was out of town. Amy didn't know for sure if Casey was living with Tony or not. It was implied that Casey hadn't been home. So I guess she just assumed she was. So, you know, she hadn't been home because she'd been at Tony's. Amy was aware of issues between Casey and her mum and knew it was about Kaylee because Cindy wanted to see Kaylee and Casey was stopping that due to issues at home between Cindy and George, and she was trying to keep Kaylee out of it. Casey told Amy that George and Cindy were considering divorce and George had cheated on Cindy. Don't know how true that is. Well, coming from Casey, you just don't know how true that is. There were at least 2 dates set for when Casey and Amy would move into Casey's parents' house. They obviously didn't happen. At one point, Amy almost booked a moving truck because I think she was excited to be moving. Casey cancelled the dates and gave the excuses, that her dad wanted to get the landscaping done before they left and other various issues. Amy can't remember exactly when. Sometime in July, Casey told her that Cindy had gone back on the deal and the move wasn't going to be happening. Amy doesn't remember if Casey gave a reason as to why Cindy had gone back on the deal. Maybe because there wasn't one in the first place. Amy says Casey stayed with her for about a week. Casey had some of her stuff in Tony's car, which she left in the car. Remember that Casey was driving around in Tony's car while he was away, which he hadn't agreed to. As previously said, Amy is friends with William Waters and she helped him organise the 4th of July party. Amy invited Casey about a week before, and Casey initially said she wouldn't be able to attend the party because of Kaylee. Amy said she should bring her. It would child friendly, and Casey said she would think about it. During the time period Casey was staying with Amy, she never really had to ask where Kaylee was because she always had an explanation. She was at the beach with a nanny, at theme parks, etc. So obviously Casey did indeed go to the 4th of July party and told Amy that Kaylee was at SeaWorld with the nanny. The 5th of July, Amy got woke up by a lot of tapping of fingernails on the computer, and it was Casey. Amy says Casey was extremely happy because Tony was coming home that day, and this was the day Casey left Amy's home. So Amy was part of the group that had planned a trip to Puerto Rico. They left on the 8th of July with a guy called JP, Ricardo and Troy. Casey did want to go with them, and even though they had left, she gave Amy the impression that she was still going to try and go, but it was obvious. Amy says it was obvious she wasn't going to be going due to childcare. 15th of July is when Amy got back from her trip, and Casey picked her up in Amy's car because Amy's car was small and they all couldn't fit in it. So Amy dropped Casey off and then went back to the airport to get the others. She dropped her off at Tony's. When they all got back, Amy went to the Florida Mall with JP, and while she was there, this was when she received a phone call from Cindy, and she said she sounded very, very, very scared. Amy was surprised because she had never spoke to Cindy before, and she was cautious because of what Casey had told her. You know, she'd told her that she was crazy and she'd heard all these arguments. So after the conversation, she met Cindy at the mall and she asked Amy to take her to Casey. Now, she'd obviously just a few hours prior dropped Casey off at Tony's. Cindy told her what had been going on over the past month. They discussed how they would approach Casey, and they decided that Amy would knock on Tony's door and have Casey come out to speak with Cindy, and Cindy would stand a bit away, so, you know, if she'd have seen Cindy, she probably wouldn't have come out. So when Amy knocked on the door, someone shouted and said it was open, so Amy had to open the door herself. Amy didn't walk into the apartment. She could see Casey from the doorway. She was sitting on the couch, so she motioned Casey to come outside. When Casey came out, Cindy was down the hall. She says Cindy was very confrontational and angry before Casey even came out. So when Casey came out, she said it was just a massive explosion of mother and daughter. Amy was obviously a little scared and didn't want to be stuck in the middle, so she left them to it and went back to the car. But she said the first question she heard Cindy ask Casey was, where is Kaylee? Casey told her she was with the nanny. It took a lot of persuasion for Casey to agree to take Cindy to see Kaylee. But she says Casey was giving as good as she got with Cindy. Eventually Casey and Cindy came back to the car. Cindy and Casey were in the front and Amy was in the back. She said nothing much was said between them apart from Cindy asking where Kaylee was. She heard Casey say that her and Kaylee needed their space. So we go on to the cross-examination. I'm always a bit nervous when he gets up because you just never know how it's going to go. And I just feel nervous for the witnesses. I mean, in all honesty, these witnesses are innocent in all this, and to come up against a defence lawyer like Baez, it can't be nice at all. So, Amy and Casey were only friends from February to July, so about 5 months, and a good portion of that was not in person, more through texts and phone calls. Baez is now talking about text messages between her and Casey. There was only one that talks about Casey going out and Cindy taking care of Kaylee. There are numerous messages from Amy asking Casey to go out. Responses from Casey include she's sick, she can't go, amongst others. See, you see things one way and then the defence gets up and, gets more information and you're like, oh, okay. Baez is pointing out that because Amy hadn't known Casey for very long, that she couldn't really know the relationship between Casey and Cindy, but she didn't really tell them what the relationship was between Casey and her mum. She gave what she heard and what she'd been told. Again, only one text message regarding the smell from Casey's car the day she left the car at Amscott. Right. So, we now move on to Baez going at Amy about her memory of that time. Says that she was drinking heavily back then, and Amy replies by saying she wouldn't say she was drinking heavily, but going out with friends just like anyone else her age. She was going out 3 to 4 nights a week. She would drink, but not significantly. So we go to the car wreck she had where she fell asleep at the wheel. Baez brings to light the fact that she had been drinking 3 hours prior, but she says it wasn't because she'd been drinking that she fell asleep, and in fact she had totaled her car. Amy did send out text to friends asking them to call her so she wouldn't pass out, and said she didn't know if she'd hit her head or anything. Baez asked if it had affected her memory or not, and she says she doesn't think so, but she didn't see a doctor afterwards for treatment. After Casey was arrested, Amy met up with Jesse, Casey's ex, the one that was the first guy that was mentioned to be Kaylee's father. Amy met up with him to help find Kaylee. She told him that she had always wanted to meet a good Christian boy. So, that was quite an interesting one, to be honest. I know she didn't know Casey for very long, but I think she got a good snapshot into Casey's life and the lies, the excuses, the craziness of that family. So the next video is Lee Anthony. It's an interesting one. So until then, bye for now.